Good evening, everyone.
Good
Thank you for
evening.
joining us this evening for the new episode of Terrazzo Talks here in Dubai. Also, a very warm welcome and greetings from the United Arab Emirates to all our viewers from around the world. I'm Lovraj Talwar, the Managing Director of the Terrazzo Group. Today, we sit down with Amar Al Assam, the Chief Executive Officer of Divan Architects and Engineers, and Brian Johnson, the Managing Partner at Godwin Austin Johnson. We will discuss all things about architecture and the future of architecture businesses in the region. I have the pleasure to introduce Amar, CEO Divan Architects. Amar joined Divan in 2003 and has taken the lead in developing and implementing strategic plan for the growth of Divan into a regional multidisciplinary and multi-market leading architectural and engineering firm. In 2007, Amar led the transaction team that secured a strategic investor in the form of Itmar Capital, a leading regional private equity firm, thereby allowing the firm to successfully expand within the region and penetrate new markets. With the growing importance of environmental consciousness and the need for expertise in designing buildings that are green and sustainable and environmentally friendly, Amar has helped lead the development of the corporate culture of the firm to be one that is focused on designing buildings that are sustainable, and Divan has actively and successfully designed buildings that have received LEED and Estidama certifications. Today, Divan Architects and Engineers is a truly regional firm operating in the Gulf, the Levant, and North Africa, and offers multidisciplinary design services, with the firm being ranked by prestigious industry publications in the top 50 globally and top 4 regionally. We are greatly privileged to have a person as experienced as Amar for our session today. A very warm welcome to you, Amar.
Thank you very much, Lovraj, for your kind words. It's my pleasure to be here with yourself and Yuvraj, and of course, Mr. Brian Johnson as well.
So I would now like to hand over to my co-moderator Yuvraj, who is the Business Development Director of the Terrazzo Group, and will be introducing the second panelist, Brian Johnson. Over to you, Yuvraj.
Thank you. Hi, Brian. Hi, Amar. Pleasure to be here with you guys today. So the topic of today's conversation is designing the buildings of tomorrow. The construction sector has been in the limelight over the past couple of months, so I'm sure we're going to get into the nitty gritty of the industry as over the course of this talk. Brian, thank you so much for being with us here today. Brian Johnson is the principal and managing partner of Godwin Austin and Johnson. Brian has maintained an almost constant presence in the Gulf region since 1975, and in 1991 he opened the Godwin Austin and Johnson's headquarters in Dubai. With more than 40 years of regional experience to his name, Brian's influence on modern Middle Eastern architecture is undeniable. His body of work comprises some of the region's most recognizable and prized buildings. Among them is Dubai Creek Golf Club, widely recognized as Dubai's first architectural icons, so much so that it features on the 20 dirham note. Recognized as one of the most distinguished architects in the region, Brian is credited with having set in motion a countrywide trend in the UAE to incorporate traditional Arabic and Islamic themes into modern architecture. And so much so, he also was the architect behind my high school in Dubai at the time, Dubai College. Thank you so much, Brian, for being with us here today.
Thank you very much.
So the format of today's conversation is similar to all of the other episodes that we've had. We'll have 5 to 6 questions of our own, and then we'll move to the audience and take as many as we can. So with that, I think I'm ready to start with our very first question, and it's relatively generic. So what are the biggest challenges you have faced over the last 2 to 3 years? And I put this to both of you. How unique have the past 2 to 3 years been for you? Has anything surprised you? Have any challenges been unique? Have any successes been unique? So Brian, why don't you start?
Well, I guess the obvious answer is that until January of this year or thereabouts, we thought that we not got a bad spread of projects, mostly hotels and schools. Now, hotels and schools not exactly what people are looking for, certainly in the UAE at the moment, and certainly we've had some schools cancelled. But prior to that, there was probably a bit of a tendency for the price to matter more than, let's say, a perception of quality, which made it quite a tough market for us, and I'm sure it did for Amar as well. But hopefully at the end of the day, you know, a combination of your reputation and so on manages to push through all that. So I think until this recent blow, which has really hit the construction industry hard, and you know, a number of cancelled and hopefully sometimes suspended, but too often it's cancelled projects, has really decimated all of our hopes for this year. That's for sure.
Understood. And how about before COVID? How were the 2 years prior to COVID?
Well, as I say, it was a tendency perhaps to go down to the bottom price. It was you know, in fee bids that we were doing for new clients, then we were just conscious of the fact that we weren't perhaps picking up work, and we saw that when it did go, it was going to people who perhaps were running from a different base. So that's always the problem, and you know, in some ways, the COVID situation may even help to weed out. It's one of your coming questions, I think, but to weed out certain sorts of opposition, and hopefully those of us who've been here a considerable time. I mean, certainly the way we operate is although we're an international UK practice, this is actually our head office, and that's, you know, our USP really is to have a Dubai-based head office of a Gulf and regional practice.
Understood. How about yourself, Amar?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, similar to Brian, we've been here, you know, 35 years in the UAE as D1, and maybe a few years before that as well, a separate name. So we've seen all kinds of ups and downs and all kinds of different cycles and progression of the market, you know, and the type of clients, and you know, the economic crisis, oil drops, etc. Obviously, you know, what happened with the COVID is very unique and unexpected, and you know, practically impossible to plan for as a firm like ours. So this particular year, you know, really our focus was obviously on you know, preservation of ongoing projects, you know, solidifying, making sure our team and our resources and our people, you know, have been with us for many years. We're about 500 people now, you know, in different parts of the country, you know, have jobs. You know, we've had to do certain sacrifices like many firms, but we've tried to minimize them to sort of the bare minimum, and just, you know, try to, you know, weather this year out and see what happens in the coming years. So the first 2-3 months were obviously quite you know, stressful and you know, just trying to understand what's going on in the world. What we have seen is that, you know, at least from our perspective, that it hasn't been, you know, a complete disaster, let's say, as we had seen, for example, in 2008, when projects just sort of went to a complete standstill overnight. So, you know, the UAE in general for us has, you know, over the last 2 years hasn't been the largest market, and our focus has been on Saudi Arabia, a bit of Africa, and Southeast Asia. And luckily, those markets are still, you know, progressing. And what started out in the UAE pretty much has continued. So what I was saying is that, you know, the last 2-3 years, our focus has been on Saudi as a firm mostly, and you know, sort of focusing on the large PIF initiatives like the Red Sea, Amala, Neom, Qiddiya, and so on. And while a lot of decisions on that were expected to sort of happen, you know, late 2019, most of them have been delayed until, you know, the last few months. But thankfully, they are starting and they are continuing. You know, we just continue to focus on our core markets in the region, but we've also recently been looking at Southeast Asia, and we've actually picked up a few jobs recently in China and Vietnam, which is, you know, something, you know, for us, we're very proud of, you know, as you know, a UAE sort of home-based firm to expand into these new markets.
How exciting! That's quite unique. I haven't heard too many local architectural firms sort of go out throughout the world, Southeast Asia specifically, that doesn't sound like an easy market. So just coming back to the UAE, I have a couple of questions. So, pressure on the UAE's construction sector has been building, at least from our perspective, over the last year to 2 years, with banks, especially now, tightening up project-related financing. Over the last 2 months, we've heard about the Arab tech catastrophe, the country's largest contractor, and pretty much a bellwether for the wider economy, heading into liquidation. Cash availability seems to be emerging as the single biggest threat to the industry in this country. Do you see that in sort of the architectural side of the supply chain within the industry? And how significant is it in the UAE specifically?
I think this one's, Amar, you're still on the screen. I don't know if you realize.
Yeah, let you answer first, Brian, if you like.
Okay, well, I think we've all been navigating the technology here a little bit. In relation to the effects of the, on the suppliers such as yourselves. I mean, I think that, we're all looking for, as I think you've already mentioned, we're all looking for the same level of quality at a reduced price. And clearly that's something that we're all having to come to terms with across the board. But I think in your particular market, then, obviously we know the product, we know what it is. All we expect from you now is discount, to be honest. So that's fine.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's the name of the game today. But so to answer you and to add on to that, Yuvraj, obviously in the construction cycle, the consultancy fees really are not the main sort of parameter that affects the overall budget of a project. So from our perspective, I agree 100%. There's a lot of pressure on fees. There's a lot of unfortunately people taking advantage maybe of the situation. Asking for reductions of fees, reduction of costs and so on. The reality is that as a firm, as a professional services firm, our costs have not changed. We still pay the same rent more or less. We still pay the same salaries more or less. And the amount of work required is the same, if not more, actually. So really, these reductions or requests for reduction in fees is affecting margins more than anything else. But the pressure, on construction is really from the contractor and bank financing issue. The recent, as you mentioned, it issue with Arab tech will have a lot of negative repercussions in the market because there'll be a lack of sort of a disengagement between finance and trust in contractors, and I think this will take some time to be cleaned out and to have sort of a new slate of what's going on in the market. But definitely, I mean, today, we have two main pressures. If you put COVID aside and all that, the main pressure is construction costs and financing. And the other pressure is obviously supply demand. If we talk about the UAE specifically, we all know that over the last 2 or 3 years, we've reached, quite a capacity in terms of how much we can build. And there was pressure on retail, there was pressure on commercial, there was pressure on residential. So regardless of that cycle, maybe the slowing down now, while it's not to the advantages of firms like D1 or Goodwin Austin Johnson or other firms like yourselves as well. Maybe in the shorter, medium term, might have positive effects on cleaning out the market and really leaving the good companies standing and able to serve in the right quality that the market deserves.
Right. So I think, to conclude, I think internally the way we see it is a survival of the fittest, at least in our niche of industry. So I think that pretty much sums up the broader industry as a whole. So Amar, specifically to you, you mentioned the other countries that you're involved in. How easy is it for a company like yours to sort of export their brand to new markets? I mean, when was the decision taken to enter these new markets? How easy or not easy has it been? And how How grateful are you that you took those decisions at the times that you did?
Yeah, I mean, to answer, first of all, we're very grateful that we have other markets to look into. So look, we started out. My father started the business here, in the late 70s as and D1 as came into existence in 1984, and really up to about mid 90s, our sole market was the UAE, and to a large extent even just Abu Dhabi and Al Ain, because that's where sort of our main focus was. And in 97, 98, we moved to Dubai, and Dubai really being more sort of institutional and more international, let's say, and with developers coming into the market. So in the old days, it was royal family, it was private family offices, etc. There weren't really developers per se. But with the late 90s, Amar coming into the picture, and some of the others, and so the freehold, freehold movement that has happened, has created a different type of, let's say, cycle or chain. So you have developers, you have more, institutional type process with RFPs and with, project management and so on. And really exposure also to a large extent to international consultants, to international investors, coming and putting FDI into the country and so on. What we did in 2007, we had a private equity firm that actually came in and bought a minority shareholding in D1. And really the purpose of that was two things. One is, to sort of exit some of the, hard work that we've done over the last 30 years. And two is just to sort of create more corporate governance and help with our expansion plans. And the first sort of, foray was into Saudi Arabia. So we started our Saudi Arabia office in 2000 and late 2007. We set up a Manila office in 2008, and really started growing that from then on, and we started getting work initially in Africa, just really through sort of reactive I guess luck, by following our clients from the Middle East to Africa. So we did work for Amar in Egypt. We're doing work for Eagle Hills in Mauritania. We have a hotel, a Kempinski hotel in Congo we're doing for a Saudi client. And we did the Kempinski in Djibouti for Dubai World at the time. So that sort of helped us enter that those different markets and really sort of grow our business there. In terms of Southeast Asia, about 3 years ago, we decided to leverage our Philippines office, which has really been a back office of about 50, 60 people, just to help us with our work here. So we got a consultant to look at the different markets in Southeast Asia that makes sense for us to enter, and we decided that really the focus would be Vietnam for us. And we went and spent a bit of time there over the last 2.5 years, set up a small office there, and just started talking to different clients. And what we noticed is that the Dubai brand specifically is really very, very strong. So when you say you're from the UAE, maybe you don't get the same sort of leverage, but when you say you're a Dubai company, everyone knows Dubai, everyone is excited by the Dubai story, by what we've done. And again, just like D1 and Brian firm and many other firms who've been here for a long time, the amount of work we've had over the last 15, 20 years, and the amount of exposure to sort of the large, complex, and really one-of-a-kind projects has been tremendously important for us as a learning tool, and also as an ability to showcase our experience. So just to answer your question, it's not difficult to expand into new markets from a financial perspective, because really our costs is are minimal in terms of setting up a business. It's an office and a few people, but really it's your commitment and ability to give it the time and to give it the dedication that it deserves without affecting your ongoing business, and making sure that your brand is successful abroad as much as it is locally.
And out of all the countries that you've mentioned, where do you see the sort of concentration being over the next 10 years? Is it Saudi Arabia? There's a lot of dialogue, discourse about the amount of work coming through Saudi Arabia? Is it a country like Vietnam that potentially not many people would expect? What are your views?
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's Saudi Arabia for sure. That's the easier market, let's say, for us. We've been there already for about 11, 12 years. The language, the relationships. Many of the people who were working in Dubai are now working in Saudi Arabia. So the ability to sort of build on those relationships makes it much easier. They know D1, they know our experience. They've worked with us here. They can work with us there. So Saudi Arabia for sure. Southeast Asia, if we get 2 or 3 projects a year for the time being and slowly build on that is really our secondary priority. And the reason for that is, although we're sort of a medium to large size firm with about 500 people, we really do operate as a very hands-on, family-owned business, and I'm involved in almost every single project. So we want to make sure we keep that culture and not just become one of these mega, large companies where you lose that sort of culture and touch.
Right. Thank you. So Brian, just to add on to that, what Godwin, Austin and Johnson done abroad? Are you looking at any of the markets that Amar has mentioned? And if not, why not? And if yes, how you have your experiences?
Okay. Well, we've been working in Egypt for many years now. We've got a very large project in Sharm el Sheikh that we've been working on. Yes, for 8 to 10 years now. And obviously Saudi, as Amar says. I mean, I think the thing about Saudi is probably that it's important for people to understand and feel that we understand that Dubai is not the be all and end all. There's an importance about people being allowed to feel that you're committed to Saudi as well. I mean, as you probably know, I mean, although a major part of our work is modern architecture, we've been involved in some traditional work like the Lovraj and Babshams and Beit Charge and so on. So there is part of the work that's going on in Saudi is very much traditional architecture, but we are very careful to make the point that although we have a track record of traditional architectural design in this country, that of course they have their own unique, the Najdi architecture is quite completely different, really. I mean, obviously it has the same roots in some of the materials and so on, but the actual understanding of the culture of these other countries is quite important. Certainly, I agree with Amar that actually the main thing is to be committed and to try to keep that small scale feeling, because architecture now is being subsumed significantly by huge mega companies who think that it's okay to be engineers and do a bit of architecture on the side. And so we sort of practices, the small to medium practices like ourselves, under a lot of pressure there, and we keep being put into situations where we're sort of thinking, well, you're bringing us in now, but actually it would have been better for the project if you brought us in a bit earlier and allowed us to do what we consider to be our value added, rather than just sometimes treating us as an architect of records type of thing. The creative side, the creative thinking that our sorts of practices can bring is actually something which we're trying more and more to get people to understand, particularly in this day and age when artificial intelligence and the ability to roll out projects. Sometimes they're even talking about software to help you design hotels and hospitals and so on. Obviously there's an enormous benefit in artificial intelligence and so on, but if you don't have that fundamental creativity in the first place, then actually our clients are going to miss out on something and be shoehorned into a pre-existing solution. That's our concern, I guess.
Understood. Awesome. Thank you guys for that.